Hey guys, how y'all doing? Glad to see you all again. Hope you guys had a great week so far. Hope you guys have been enjoying yourselves. So today I decided to do something a little bit different. Today I'll be doing more of a character type of drawing. It's been a while since I did one of these type of character drawings here on the stream, so I figured today would be a good time to do it. So I figured I would actually draw again probably one of my favorite music musicians, one that I listen to like every now and then. Guy by the name of Sonny Sharrock. So he was a guitarist, and the funny about him, he was like an avant-garde guitarist. And the thing with him is that even though he played guitar, he often approached it, as like a sax player. And what I mean by that is that he was influenced by a lot of like sax players that were coming up in a lot of the late 50s, like 60s, that were going more avant-garde. So like Late Coltrane, Archie Shepp, Pharoah Sanders. He was more influenced by those guys, and he actually initially wanted to play saxophone. But what had happened was that he had asthma, so he really couldn't really play sax as well as he wanted to. So he took up a guitar. And so, in fact, so that's kind of what I think I'm actually doing now is actually draw. Is actually gonna draw him, and this will be the first time in a while that I've drawn him, because I've drawn him a few times before. Because I know I've drawn him once with character form. I think a couple of years back, where I did more of a Hanna-Barbera stuff. I was almost considering doing that here too. And there was another time I actually did more of a realistic portrait of him. So let me bring out his for his arms here. I'm sorry I started a little later later. I had a few things I take care of like early in the day before I actually even got started. Plus I had to do things to get things ready for the stream. So I apologize for the late start. In fact, give me just one moment. Hey, like I said, hey, glad you dropped in. Good to see you. Really good to see you. Yeah, I'm actually just kind of just started drawing just a few minutes ago. I'm sorry I started a little later than I had planned on doing so. Also, I appreciate your comments on the new two shorts I made. So maybe his other arm here. And I'm kind of using kind of a photo reference of Sharrock here for the pose. Because not that many photos from out there, because this was towards he had passed away years ago. But I did find one from the 80s that's actually really good. I'm doing well. I appreciate you asking. I started a little later than I meant to, but I'm actually doing pretty well. Yeah, but the guy I'm actually drawing today is Sonny Sharrock. So he's one of my personal favorite not favorite guitarists, favorite musicians too. And what's interesting about Sharrock here is, like he was kind of one of the first kind of guitarists, at least in the jazz scene, to really use a lot of like heavy chords, feedback. In fact, I've heard some people compare him to like the Hendrix in the jazz world. But the funny thing about it, between difference between him and Hendrix is that Hendrix, Hendrix's guitar playing was more blues based, because that's what he studied. He studied the blues before he formed his own style. Whereas Sonny, he studied the more guitar. Excuse me, sorry my words. He studied more of the sax giants like Coltrane, Archie Shepp. That's what he did. In fact, one of the very first things he did, when he was starting out in his music career, he actually played, like for Pharoah Sanders albums. I never said how your drawing is always so clean. Oh, thank you. Part of the thing what I normally do is like whenever I start off, drawing something out, I usually try to start with very little pressure whenever I'm sketching something out. And what I do is that instead of drawing with the tip, I tend to draw on the side and just kind of glide across the paper, so that way I can get these nice smooth lines. But also, a lot of times what I do as beforehand, even when I don't really have like a drawing plan, I do a lot of gesture drawings. And gesture drawings, they're really really small, like quick drawings where you're more focused on getting the actual pose and movement of the actual drawing itself, rather than like worrying on proportions and worrying about details. And plus, that just comes from years of practice too. Yeah, because believe me, there was a time they didn't look like this. Let me bring the hand down a bit here. Let me just see if I can get these hands right here. I tell you, hands, like, it's funny, as long as I'm in our hands are always tricky for me to do. They're always the Achilles heel in a way. Maybe he's gotta get his mustache. Maybe kind of get his jawline here. Let me see. And where was I? So, oh yeah. It's one of his very first things, Sharrock did. He played for Pharoah Sanders. Pharoah Sanders, he was more in like spiritual, like free jazz, his avant-garde scene. And so he played on his first album there, and then he played with a flute player, Herbie Mann. He played Herbie Mann throughout like the '60s and '70s, and this stuff's pretty interesting there too because like for those who know like Herbie Mann, he played a lot of like really light, very light, almost Latin tinge jazz, very light, very commercial accessible. At least for the '60s it was, and then with Sonny, with him in the mix. He was kind of a wild card with his groups because at one point he'll be playing like very like light, nice, but then all of a sudden out of nowhere, it's like he kind of play these heavily chorded, heavy like distorted like sort of solos, and they got more and more like chaotic kind of as they went along. Let me get the ears. And then, of course, later on, probably one was more well-known. Awesome. Hey, thank you. Probably one was more well-known ones. Now, he has a few more wells, like, later on the line. He had an uncredited appearance on Miles Davis' tribute to Jack Johnson. Of course, folks who know Miles Davis, he, on top of doing a lot of, like, cool jazz, modal jazz, and mole jazz, he actually did that period where he started going to more fusion stuff. And, tribute to Jack Johnson, personally, I think it's probably one of his best like fusion albums from that period. But he had Sonny on there, and I think initially when the album came out, he wasn't credited on there because there's only 2 tracks and he's only on one, and his stuff is really like low in the mix. You have to really kind of listen to hear because there's already another guitarist who's already credited on the album. I heard. I think he only came in like pretty late during the sessions, and I can't remember where I heard this from, but apparently, remember, I think he and Miles didn't get along because apparently, Miles went. I think after they did the album. Miles had brought him back in because they wanted to do an audition, and then Sharrock told him like, "What are you talking about? I played on your damn album. That was my audition." And it's kind of surprising to know that Miles, you put him on there, because, like, despite Miles going pretty out there, with the fusion stuff, Miles really wasn't really keen on the whole avant-garde thing that was coming up at the time. In fact, that was the thing, like, an avant-garde scene, like, a lot of these guys, like Coltrane, like Ornette Coleman, Archie Shepp, they were kind of like doing some different stuff that, like, thought everyone was really into at the time, but they end up really forming like their own following and start doing things their own way. And Sonny just kind of fall within that period. Let me see if I can get the face around here. Because he had a very roundish face, but it was also very angular too. Let me get around the lips here. Let me get his glasses. Because he often wore very large, thick, large lens glasses, especially during his later years. And so, of course, once the 70s rolled, he started releasing his own solo albums. So he had like 3 in the 70s. So he had he had Black Woman, Monkey Pocky Boo, and Paradise. And as someone who listens to a lot of his music, I gotta say his 70s ones for me are kind of a mixed bag. Because for one, he doesn't really showcase a lot of his playing style on those albums. They're often a lot of his playing styles on that one, and also on that one they feature his wife at the time, Linda. And the only thing about Linda, she's more avant-garde too, but she also has those Yoko Ono type of like singing where she kind of does like screeching and hollering. And granted, she's a little more listenable than Yoko. Sometimes it can be a little distracting. And I think there was one album from that period that he didn't really care for was Paradise. That was it was the last one he did. It was the last one he did in the 70s, but it was also the last one he did with his wife. And that one's kind of probably the strangest of all of them because in that one he doesn't really have like an album like a jazz like he had on his previous albums. That one he has more kind of like a funk like R&B type group. So you had this weird discourse going on where he and his wife, they're doing all this like avant-garde like jazz stuff, but yet the group he's playing with, they have more like an R&B like a funky style. So you have these two styles that are they're almost, for most of them, are kind of playing against each other. And there's probably a few times where it works, where they're both kind of in sync with each other, but a lot of times they're at odds. So I can understand the wife probably doesn't really care for that album that much. Plus, it doesn't help that unfortunately, they not too long later afterwards, they did end up getting a divorce, so that doesn't help either. But after that, what happened? He actually did semi-retire from playing music. I think from like the 70s to the 80s, he actually retired from playing music. He actually worked at a mental health facility where he kind of dealt with like kids who were having health problems. So he did that for a while, and he kind of came out back in the why didn't I mean kinda? No, he definitely did. During the 80s, he kind of came out with Bill Laswell, because because one thing about Sharrock, he worked in New York, and Bill Laswell, who also was in New York too, he actually did a lot of different like underground like jazz and rock groups, and so Bill convinced him to come out of retirement to play on his group on his album Memory Served with Material. And Material, now they were a group where they did a lot of like no wave, experimental like jazz and punk stuff. And so he had him play on that album. And then after he did that, then he started actually doing a lot more recording throughout the 80s and 90s he occasionally appeared on other stuff, but he started doing a lot more stuff for himself. And I remember it was during this period, he actually started, it was in a group called Last Exit. Now, Last Exit is basically, what would happen if you got a bunch of avant-garde musicians, but you actually gave them more of a heavy metal sound? Because at this point, he developed a sound to where he kind of took his heavily recorded, like, feedback sound, and he's got it turned up way to the max here. And on top of that, like, he's got other musicians too, because it's him. He's got Bill Laswell on bass. He's got Peter Jackson. Got I think it's Roland Shannon Jackson on drums and Peter Brodsman on saxophone. And to be fair, like the stuff on Last Exit, it's a pretty hard listen because it's really loud, very chaotic. I'd say of all of his stuff, it's probably like the most at least accessible because it does get really noisy at times. I dig, because I always dig, like weird stuff like that. But he was doing that for a while, like throughout the 80s. Because I remember he did that. I think him and Peter Brosnan, they did those things in the 80s too, where I think they did an album with I think the drummer from Cream, Ginger Baker. I forgot the name of that album, but he did something with them for a while. But then after a while, he started doing his more solo stuff. He even formed his own band. And also, I think a lot of his stuff he was doing throughout the 80s, later than 90s, was kind of his best stuff. Because then it was at this point, I think, where he really started honing in his sound. I'm gonna have to erase this, gotta fix that hand. Of course, let me get his guitar in the middle. Let me get the neck of the guitar. Oh, hey, Shay, I'm so sorry. Oh, Shay, I didn't realize you dropped in. Yeah, but this guy, he was he was by far managed like a guitar player. Shay, I'm glad to see you dropped in. Next week is Valentine's Day. That's right, it is. That's right, I completely forgot. It is next week. I tell you, the month is already flying by, and it just started. I played Bust a Move 2 on RX Max. Oh, nice. I've heard it's pretty good. I don't have to check that out. So let me kind of focus on getting the guitar here too. Hey, I always got you. Yeah, anytime I'm drawing instruments, I always have to kind of stop myself from talking a little bit so I can focus on getting the look right. So let me kind of bring the guitar neck, get down. I think he played more like a Gibson, because that was a pretty well, still is a pretty popular guitar for folks to use. fact, let me kind of bring out the neck out a little bit more. There we go. Yeah, Busta Bob and Bob are super cute driving the video case and their voices are adorable. I don't know if I've heard of them. I'll have to check them out. But they do sound cute. But where was I? But yeah, he was doing a lot more stuff in the 80s. He did a solo stuff called Guitar, and that was when it's all just him, where he's doing both, playing all the solo and rhythm stuff. But one of the very last thing he did, and it was also kind of part reason how I found out about how I found out in the first place. He did the soundtrack. He played on the soundtrack for Cartoon Network Space Ghost from Coast to Coast. Those who remember Cartoon Network back in the 90s, they had a lot of different shows, but one of the shows was Space Ghost from Coast to Coast. And those who remember, that rocking intro the show had and some of the music that was in between, that was him. That was this guy here. And and apparently thought it was a very cute project to kind of work on, because he normally didn't really do like soundtrack stuff like that often. So that was kind of a change of pace for him. And like I meant for it ended up fortunately being one of the last projects he worked on. Because I think about a couple years after, in 1994, he ended up kind of passing away at 53. And it was really kind of sad too, because like it was around the same time he had just got signed to MCA Records. So that was his first major record deal in his career. Because keep in mind, he wasn't really that well known throughout most of his career, and it was like right during that period where he finally started getting some attention. In a way, it's like whenever I kind of hear his stuff, like it's always missing, because there's not that much information out there, but like, especially since he wasn't really making that much music early on, but he started making more stuff like later in life. But also like with Sonny, like I can't think of that many other guitarists that really sounded like him. Like the only people I can really think of was maybe Santana, because like Santana was actually dug Sonny, but he had a completely like original like sound. And that's the thing, like some musicians, like there are some musicians where you don't there are some musicians, like once you hear them, you know what they sound like. And despite, people that try to really kind of like imitate and really study their sound, they can never quite get it right, because they just had that certain thing about that really set them apart from their contemporaries. Okay, I think it's looking pretty good. Let me quiet down for a little bit and kind of like tighten up some of these loose ends here. In fact, for some of these larger details, let me kind of break out the regular pencil. Let me get his other hand at the top here. Yeah, usually I'll probably grab the graphite pen if I need to go back and start looking over and start adding in extra details, especially ones that are kind of tricky like hands. kind of go around the face a little more here. Make sure that actually looks good. And what I'm thinking about going this time around, once I start inking this in, I am thinking of doing some more clean lines, because initially when I start this up, I wanted to kind of be more like those old. I got some MP3 player. I've inserted that SD card, navigate the song. So, oh, excellent. Yeah, I got a few MP3 players kind of lying around. I haven't really touched them in a while. In fact, I actually got one like right here on my desk. I got this one right here. This is an old SanDisk. I think I got this about a couple of years back. I often like to keep some old some old ones around, so in case if I ever have a situation where I need to play some music, but if I'm not able to play them on my phone, at least I have stuff on here I can play along with. And usually if I wanted to have something to kind of listen, if I'm walking somewhere or if I'm on the go, I like to have one on standby if need be. I've had different ones I've came to pass too, because I've had MP3, because I've had large ones, I've had small ones. I've even had a few iPods. In fact, I remember for the longest time, I had like an iPod Shuffle, and basically for the iPod Shuffle, it was only like, I think it was only like 1 gig. I think it was only 1 gig to my recollection. But I was able to get a lot of different songs on there. And it was perfect cool because, it was easy to set, because all I could do was just plug it in, just load up the songs on there. And often if I got some new music on there, basically I was going to go and load it up, just take off the ones I wouldn't listen to as much, put the next music on there, and then just do a vice versa for the next stuff that would come up. Get the glasses, we bring these out. Yeah, MP3s, having some MP3s always comes in handy, especially anytime we would have plays with music. And even though I don't use them that often, I like having them on hand, just in case. I think I have a little part in the middle here, because I know for a brief while, he used to have like kind of like an afro type deal where he had a part in the middle. You have a jacket, because especially in his later, usually like kind of wearing jackets too. Oh, another thing about for Space Ghost, now on top of doing the soundtrack when he had passed, even the guys that were working on Space Ghost, they actually did a tribute episode to him, and in that one, they had one episode simply titled Sharrock. They had a dedication to him, and he even played some previously unheard music he recorded, for the show throughout that episode. And I remember watching it on YouTube a couple of years back, and it's actually pretty good, because like I can't really think of any other show that I know that did like a full tribute to like a person that worked on their show, at least to that degree. So I think that's really rad that he actually did that. And weird is I don't even remember seeing it back when it was out, because I remember watching Space Ghost all the time, because like those who remember Space from Coast to Coast, it came on like late at night. Hang on, stand by. Alright guys, I'm back. Yeah, sorry about that. I had to go ahead. Yeah, I actually had a call came in. It was actually my mother. I had to talk to her for a few minutes. So we go. So I'm just kind of go around the guitar neck here. And I mentioned earlier in the stream, this is like my third time drawing him because I think last time I drew him, I did a drawing where I drew him more like a Hanna-Barbera style. You know, because since he drew on Space Ghost, I figured why not drew a character style that's more, always more like a Hanna-Barbera character. In fact, I wonder if I have it on it, to have it nearby so I can show y'all. I don't think I have it on me at the moment. Yeah, actually, I don't think I have it on me because I try to keep all my sketches, my old sketches in a box. And right now, the one I technically have is in the garage. In fact, I need to go through my garage, go through that box in the garage, kind of get rid of some old sketches because that's something I did earlier last year when I had to move. You know, I kind of got rid of a lot of like really old like not full, mainly like old like old like loose sketches, like old like old drawings I had that I wasn't really using for anything. But these are mainly like more like practice ones and bad ones that I did. Like these weren't necessarily like ones where I actually kind of like posted on here or on social media. Like I haven't tossed those. Because it is getting to a point now where they are taking up a lot of room. So I think one thing I probably will start doing is that I'll probably start doing is taking more pictures of them before letting them go. So like one thing I've actually kind of done is really kind of like usually basically I'll probably take out the good pictures from certain sketchbooks, just take out the good ones, and then just save the then toss sketchbook, but just save the pictures that I made. Tiny Toons University shows on Boomerang UK this month. Oh, cool. You know what? I have not really I haven't had a chance to really sit down and watch Tiny Toons University. Like, I've seen parts of it. I remember actually kind of liking it. But if I had, but for instance, I hadn't had a chance to really sit down and really kind of like watch the show and really see how it is compared to the original show. Because I've seen I used to watch Tiny Toons all the time. Growing up on Nickelodeon and on Cartoon Network, but I haven't really seen the new one just yet. I think I saw it briefly in passing when I was on vacation, and if I saw it on TV, I came across it there, but I hadn't really got on a really kind of like watchable shows yet because I've heard people say good. Some people say it's okay. I've heard some people say it's actually good. I've heard even some people say it's even better than the original. I guess I've also been kind of a little nervous to kind of check it out because I hear it is very different compared to the original show. Especially one with making Babs and Buster Prey actually have them be actual siblings rather than rather a couple like they were in the last one. Because those remember the original one, like, remember the original show, like, yeah, part of their whole gag was that we're Babs and Buster Bunny, no relation. And they don't so now they don't really do that new one, to my recollection, since they're actually siblings now. And I also don't know is they got like a whole new cast of new characters now, because I think because I'm trying. Let me look up and see who they bring back for the who they bring for Tiny Toons, if any. Tiny Toons University. Oh yeah, I think these are May. Okay, they got a few folks back. Jeff Bergman. I think he did a voice back in the original too. Jeff Bergman, he's back. Fred Tatasciore. I think he did. He was in the first one too. Cree Summer as Elmira. Okay, they got her back. Okay, so they got a few people from the old show back. Because I know that a lot of the newer guys, like Eric Bauza, he pretty much took over for Buster Bunny. They have a new lady, Ashley Harrison. She does Babs. Derek Ergo Jr. He does Plucky Duck in Hampton. Okay, so they do have a lot more newer voice actors for Tiny Toons characters now. I'm trying to think, who do they have for Max? Okay, Oh, Kenny Milo does Montana Max now. Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that. You know, because even the little bits I've heard, I was kind of wondering if they had gotten some original voice actors, because a lot of them sound pretty close to the original. Well, I know hearing Eric Bauza does Buster, that's not surprising, because he's often a whiz at really doing all those different characters, and even sounding like some of the original like actors too. So what I think I will do now, let me get our ink pen. I'll start drawing our outlines. The one thing about doing these outlines, they're a lot easier kind of like once you kind of lay down the groundwork with your pen with pencil. It's a lot easier to do it when you're laying down the pen work. Trust me, this would be a lot harder if I didn't lay down any sketches beforehand. Get the neck of the guitar here. I was going to use this one after the whole piece. I'm probably not going to now because I realize this thing's kind of running out of ink. Let me see something. I say, yeah, I'm looking up the drug for Tiny Toons University. So a lot of these folks, like so a lot of these so for a lot of the old characters in there, they got recasted because I know for Buster Bunny, I was wondering if they had got because I knew Charlie Alder wouldn't be coming back, because I know Charlie Alder, he voiced him in the original Tiny Toons, but he ended up leaving because apparently he had kind of this issue that they weren't really giving him like enough work, not only on that show but also on Animaniacs as well. Well, actually, I don't think he did any work on Animaniacs. I think that was kind of part of the issue. They didn't really give him any work there, but then of course he left, And then on John Kassir, he took over him in the later seasons of the original show. And honestly, that's what I thought would be coming back to voice him in the new one, the new University show. So I think what I am doing, I'm gonna go over it with a smaller pen. Yeah, let me get a different pen. Yeah, here we go. Let me get the specs of his glasses. Let me get the lips. Let me get his little mustache. I have a part in the middle where it was kind of sandy because I think as you guys getting older, his fro, it started kind of graying in certain areas, especially like kind of he kind of a gray part in the middle. So I'll make sure I get that. So we kind of bring this down, bring it around. Now let me see for his guitar strap, where would that normally be? I think we'll have the guitar strap coming down here. Then he get his other hand right here. Let me bring out these fingers, make it a little more obvious. He's looking awesome. Hey, thanks. He was a pretty awesome musician, so I wanted to make sure he looks awesome. Yeah, anytime if I'm in one of my more jazzy moods, I usually like to kind of put him on a play. When it comes to Sonny Sharrock, I think there's a couple of albums that I really do like. That's probably my top favorites. One would have to be, well, of course, it would have to be his last. It'd be his very last studio. I would call "Ask the Ages." That one, I think, if you're ever I think anyone who's curious in checking out Sonny Sharrock, I recommend Ask the Ages to being the very first one to check out, because that what I think really kind of captures him, really kind of really captures Sonny as an artist and who he was. Because at this point, it has some of his best work, but also, you know, it's kind of back to his roots too. Because in that one, he's paired with a lot of different jazz musicians. So he's paired with drummer Elvin Jones, bassist Charnette Muffet, and of course, the guy he first played when he started his career, Beryl Sanders on saxophone. It's a really great album. Probably one of my, definitely considered one of my personal favorite, like, top jazz albums. Another one would have to be High Life. Now that one's a little different because it's a little more accessible than Jason Moore. Because, you know, like, well, Ask the Age is more like more straight ahead, like avant-garde jazz and jazz fusion. Like High Life is a little different, where it's jazz, but it has more of like a pop and rock sheen to it. It's a little more radio friendly, even though it doesn't quite get too much in that feel. That one's another one I recommend if you want something that's a little more accessible. High Life is one. And there's another one, like if you're something that's a little more on the heavier side, then there's one called Seize the Rainbow. And in that one, that's one where he really kind of goes more into hard rock like territory, you know, with his tone and his playing style. Yeah, for this one, I wanted to try to keep the lines kind of pretty clean. Since I want to kind of be more like those. I was going for something more akin to those like characters done by Al Hirschfeld. Cause I know when I first got into like studying character drawings, I really kind of like to study how Hirschfeld like before I studied other ones too. 'Cause I think the few character drawings I would study, I studied Al Hirschfeld. I studied what's another one I was wasn't I was studying one? I think it was Kruger. What was his name? Sebastian Kruger. That's it. I mean, I think I studied him for a while because, you know, like Kruger, you know, he did a lot of stuff more like the '80s and '90s where he did these really wild, like almost grotesque like caricatures. And he still does work today, but he doesn't. But he kind of tones a lot of his stuff down. Like he doesn't really exaggerate as much as he used to, like back in the day. In fact, I might have to break out one of my larger pens here. Let me see. fact, what I will do, like, here's I know in black. I was gonna cut this in black too, but I think I might use a different, might use like a gray for his jacket. There we go. Yeah, now that I've pretty much done a lot of the visual line work here, I'm just kind of like really kind of like eyeing it to seeing what other stuff I can add to it. Oh shit, I don't know if it's on there. I've been seeing a lot of your newer stuff on here. It's been looking really good. In fact, since you mentioned Valentine's Day, I decided that reminds me, I still gotta do a few things for Valentine's Day. I hadn't decided what I'm gonna do just yet. I'm tempted probably, I might do something with Manny. I might draw some for him there. I might do something with him. Maybe I'll do something a little bit different. But you know, it was one of those holidays that kind of snuck up on me because I hadn't really planned anything for Valentine's Day other than probably just working. Because you know, up at my job, doing my day job, well, one of my day job at Publix, you know, we've already started breaking out a lot of our Valentine's sale stuff. So of course we got a lot of, you know, like the candy, the chocolates. We got a full display up front set up for folks that come in and buying stuff there. I think, can't remember where I read this from. Apparently, like, the highest sales for chocolate is around Valentine's Day. Yeah, what I think I'm gonna do now, like, I'm just gonna use this pen to kind of go over these outlines, thicken them up. Add more wrinkles into his little jacket. And again, guys, I appreciate all you that had seen the my new YouTube short of me drawing Scruffy swept from Futurama. And the thing about it is, like, for that stream, I didn't do that last week. I actually just did that for a very short stream earlier this past I think it was this past Wednesday, where I ended up drawing Scruffy on screen. It started very short stream I did on TikTok. I think this would end up taking about, I think, 30-40 minutes. Yeah, this ended up not really taking all that long to do. But it was kind of fun because it was the first time in a while like I did like a full like pen drawing like this, where I decided to keep the lines a little more cleaner, not and very sketchy. Because normally if I do like an old pen drawing, I tend to keep everything like really sketchy. And usually if I go for more clean line work, like I'm doing here, I usually keep it clean if I'm planning on doing something like in full color. I might go back over with this pen. Let me see if I can thicken these up a bit. I think I might have to go ahead and let this pen go after I'm done with this drawing. Because this thing's really not that much use to me, you know, if I can't get a good solid get good solid colors with them. Yeah, I'm just kind of having to kind of press these on to get these thicker lines. Like that's how it's like low on ink that it's gotten right now. All right, so let me see. What else can I add? I got some spare. Well, I realized the pencil I was smearing. I realized the graph on the pencil was smearing, but let me erase some of that. Let me erase some of that so it's actually a little bit cleaner. Like I mentioned for my other chains, I always like to start light when I start sketching things out. So that way, if I need to erase them, it's not as hard. I think it always helps, you know, use light pressure early on, then go heavier once you already have like the lines that you want. I think what I am going to do next, let me kind of go around our outline here. I think I'll kind of do them kind of like I do my more rock star ones. I also played Choo Choo Rocket, one of the games I remember. I don't know if I've heard of Choo Choo. Choo Choo. I don't think I've ever played that game. I'm trying to think, what else was I getting ready to mention? What was it? It'll probably come back to me. Yeah, part of what kind of inspired me to kind of draw Sonny today too. And I was like thinking about his music, but also this helps us this Black History Month. Figure I might as well, you know, like pay tribute to him this month as well by drawing him. And so clear. So the fun part, let me add the streaks. It's a big kind of fan him out with these streaks to kind of add that intensity, because his music, that's the funny thing about Sonny's music, he had that really sublime mixture where his music could be really intense and brutal, but it could be very melodic and beautiful too. It's also the reason when it comes to more avant-garde, especially avant-garde guitars, he's one of the few I really listen to regularly, because I've listened to other avant-garde guitars, because of course there's like James Blood Ulmer. Now James Blood Ulmer, he has more of a bluesy sound, but also differences, you know, of James Blood Ulmer, he's more big in the harmonic sound like Ornette Coleman. Well, in fact, he used to play with him for a while. No, actually, not for a while. I think he's still been like starting out before he did his own thing. And then there's other ones like Derek Bailey. Now, Derek Bailey, his stuff, for me, it's a little hard to get into because it's avant-garde, but also it's a little more minimalistic too. Where he doesn't really play notes per se, he plays more sounds. And even then, like for him, like sometimes it kind of depends on who he's playing with, or like, because there have been some musicians where I may not really care for their particular style that much, but I do like them because they decide to pair themselves with some really good musicians. Like I know for Derek Bailey, I know one of them I remember really liking that he did pretty. That I really like. It was one he did with Jack DeJohnette and I think Jack DeJohnette on drums and Jack DeTuna on bass, and that rhythm section they came to this really almost like this funky but avant-garde sound. And with him playing over it, he kind of really melded with their styles very well. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Trying to see. I do want to add black here. You know, I think I'm just gonna stick with the gray. So in fact, speaking of that, let me break out some of my markers. Let me see where are they? Oh, here we go. It's kind of being really quick. I'm laying down the marker because since these are like water based, when they tend to dry very fast and kind of streaky, and sometimes that streaky is unavoidable. I would use my alcohol based marker, but since it's actually regular sketch paper here, it's gonna really bleed. Not throw this paper, but also the other ones like right underneath. So it's not exactly ideal to use for this type of paper. I think I'll fan out part of his leather jacket here at the bottom too. In fact, I think I'll actually put that on part of his hair as well. I think I'll use that on his part of his glasses here. Use them here as well. Let me see. I know I have some brown here that I can use for him here. Let me see. Where is it? In fact, his Lego or that brown here. Can I go his fingers? Hey, Brendan Barney, good to see you. Glad you're able to drop in. Yeah, I'm actually kind of trying to almost kind of wind down the stream. Basically, I've been drawing a guitarist I listen to, like Sonny Sharrock, and just to kind of give a brief recap, if you're just dropping in, Sonny Sharrock, he was like an avant-garde guitarist, and he played a lot of stuff like throughout the 70s and 80s. But probably one of the more well-known things that he did was if you remember Space Ghost goes back to the 90s on Cartoon Network, he used to play late at night. And it had that rockin' intro that played in the beginning and end. Yeah, that was him. He played the soundtrack for that show. And when he passed, because it was also one of the very last projects that he did, they actually dedicated a full episode to him. And I was mentioning like earlier in the stream, how I thought that was pretty neat that they actually dedicated a whole episode, because I can't think of too many shows, especially shows on Cartoon Network, that actually took out time to really do that. But I always thought that was really cool. They did do that for him. And he got his guitar, because I know him. I think sometimes he played. I know a lot of guitars I've seen him play. He usually played little black guitars. I'm saying they're black or they're kind of dark, like burgundy. I think I'll use a little burgundy for his guitar here, so at least make it pop against the black background a bit more. But he had a really distinct sound. Yeah, he's probably one of the few artists, like that I will no longer with us that I would really wish that I got a chance to see live. That I got a chance to see live when he was still around. Because he passed, I think, back in 94, so like I was probably only like a year old at the time, so I would have got a chance to really see him if I somehow knew him. So let me kind of get along the side here too. And I decided to go for more clean line work here, kind of similar to, like, say, what, Al Hirschfield's like type of caricaturing. And the weird thing about like Al Hirschfield's type of character, it's surprisingly kind of hard to study, because Al Hirschfield's like type of character style is very, in a way, it's kind of minimalistic, because he would try to really get your likeness with as little lines, as possible. So oftentimes his stuff is kind of really kind of childlike study versus someone like, say, like Steven Kruger, where he used a lot of lines, but he also used a lot of shadows. He used a lot of details whenever he did caricatures. Maybe it's kind of go over these lines again. Yes, and the song somewhere, someone's advertised giant fair. Someone's advertised giant song for today. You say to perform the cool verse. Oh, is that a new story idea? Oh, that sounds nice. I know. I think I did see it. I think I do see you actually send me some new stuff in the Discord. I had a chance to really check it out. Yeah, I've been pretty busy for most of all this week, so I had a chance to really get on Discord as often as I intended to. I think I'll use like a dark brown for the guitar strap. But yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out. I like that. Okay, maybe using brown wasn't a good idea for the guitar strap. You know what? This might be fine. I can make it work. Yeah, but I'll definitely check, see if I try to check a later day once I get the chance. But I do like that idea though. The sound soundbar. I like that idea. Let me see. What color do I want to use in the middle here? I think I'll probably use blue in the middle. Kind of get kind of streaky towards the edge. And fun fact, I think I do remember coming across an interview like years ago, because I think I've heard some people have compared, he kind of like the Hendrix the Jazz, because he utilized so much feedback and heavy chords, kind of like Hendrix with his music. And I think it was like an interview, I think, where someone did ask him about that, if he was influenced by Hendrix, and surprisingly, he actually said that he didn't. He said, I think I recall him saying he was aware of him, but he never really checked him out until like much later in life. I think till like the 80s. I think apparently someone gave him a CD and it was like, oh, that's neat. So he was aware of him, but he never really. But I don't think he was ever really influenced him all that much. At least not in like his early career. I think probably later. I'm pretty sure probably in the 80s once he started working with Bill Laswell, because Bill Laswell, who's a big time producer, he worked with a lot of like punk, like experimental, like rock and metal groups. He probably turned him on to that more like heavier stuff like later on down the line. Let me color in parts of the fretboard. Let me see. Is there anything else I want to add? I think I will add some red here if I have some red on me. Let me see. I should. Let me kind of go over this line here. Yeah, I definitely consider probably one of my top favorite guitarists. I'm definitely one of the more original guitarists that are out there. There's several others I'd like to list too, but I probably want to list too. But I figure if I start getting into those, like this whole stream of being like way more than double the time is now. Because there's a whole other bunch of guitarists that I love that I love to talk about here. From like Terry Catt from Chicago, Eddie Hazel from Funkadelic. He's another good one. John McLaughlin's another great one I'd love to talk about one day. There's so many out there. Wes Montgomery. Oh, no, Wes Montgomery's not there, right? He's pretty well known in the jazz scene. Let me see. So. I think I'll use a little bit of red here. Not going to use too much. Use it to kind of go over. see. Yeah, I would like to get in on the album from, because to my knowledge, I think they did release the album. I think the soundtrack album for Specs. Apparently, it did come out like not long after show was still around. So it included all those recordings, but I think, unfortunately, to my knowledge, that album is out of print. So apparently, it's really hard to find. Yeah, apparently the soundtrack for that show came out in 1996, so about a couple of years after he passed. But to my knowledge, it's still out of print, so it's really hard to come by. But if it ever does come back in print, or if I'm able to find, like a copy for cheap in one of these record stores, because like I tend to go a lot, like every now and then I tend to go to these record stores and find like find stuff there. If I come across it there, I might decide to go and pick it up. I could check online as well, but the only thing about checking out online, first of all, depends on where you find it from, because like you find these sales online, they may charge like, because you have some where they'll charge a reasonable price, maybe be it'll be like in the dozens, maybe it'll be like $20-something. But then there's stuff that's where it's like maybe $100, maybe thousands of dollars, depending on how rare it is. And you don't even get me started on vinyls; those can go up in the thousands, depending, like if it's like a first edition, it's from a first edition, it was a first pressing, or if it's like one of those imports from Japan or something, those can go even higher than that. Shockingly. Screwy Squirrel. Oh, Screwy Squirrel. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen those cartoons in a minute. Yeah, I remember Boomerang used to play those all the time. I remember back when they were, at least when they weren't on autopilot the last few years, they played this stuff all the time. And funny enough, I can't help think about that one time, because I remember reading about it, but also I had vague memories of seeing it too, where I think it was in 97. It was 96 or 97, I recall, where for April Fools, they played one short of Screwy Squirrel. I think it was Happy Go Lucky. I'm trying to which one was it, where they played like one Screwy Squirrel, and they played the whole day for 24 hours straight, like the whole day. And the thing about it, I think I vaguely remember actually seeing that happen. Let me look and see which one that was. I can't believe I don't remember, because it's like, dude, he only had a few. He only had a few cartoons until Tex decided to kill him off. I think after about maybe a couple of them. Let me see. Which one was it? Yeah, this was on April Fool's Day in 1997. Cartoon Network broadcast an edit version. Yeah, because it was a blackface guy they edited out of the 1944 Screwy Squirrel cartoon Happy Go Nutty, repeatedly from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. as part of April Fool's joke that the cartoon had seized control of the network. Yeah, I think I vaguely remember that. And if I did, I probably saw it in the evening. Probably caught it towards the tail end where they were playing it. Yeah, I have vague memories of that happening. That just kind of shows you how wild and experimental Cartoon Network was back in the day. Like, they would actually like do stuff like that. I think I'll use a little pink here. What's this sound down here? Huh. Says on April Fool's Day 2012, Cartoon Network broadcast Screwy Squirrel's debut cartoon Screwball Squirrel at 6 a.m. at 11:45, and marks the first time a cartoon by Tex Avery was broadcast on the network since the Tex Avery Show. Okay, now that I didn't know. I didn't know they. Oh, I know they played them on there that late. Well, it's kind of a one-time thing. Let me see. Oh, 2012. Oh, okay, that makes sense. I wasn't really watching like Cartoon Network that much by 2012. I think at that point, cause I think this was still in the wake of like CN Real. I think when CN Real was out, I pretty much kind of stopped really watching Cartoon Network all that much. And at that point, I was already watching like Disney Channel, Netflix, but also I had access to Boomerang at the time too, so I didn't have to worry about like to worry about what they were playing on Cartoon Network at the time. I just had Boomerang to kind of like I could turn to. And okay, I think I'm gonna call it here for this one. I don't think there's any more I can add for Sharrock here. So I think that's all I'm gonna do from Sonny Sharrock here. So it's been cool to get a chance to actually drawing this guy again. It's been years since I've drawn him, so it was cool to get a chance to do him again. Let me refocus again so you guys can actually see it. So I appreciate all you to actually kind of drop in for him today's stream. I might edit the work I did down for this into another like short, kind of like I did for the Scruffy one I did on TikTok earlier a few days ago. Because this one was actually kind of like another like kind of a 40-minute, like 40 minute stream that I kind of edit down to like a little short. And I appreciate all you guys that actually kind of liked that one. Because that's the first time in a while I kind of posted a short and it actually got some traction. Yeah, but guys, I appreciate all you that kind of came for today's show. I know this one was a little bit different from what I normally do. So I do appreciate you guys actually kind of came out for it. Awesome work. Goodbye. Hey, thanks, Shay. I'm glad you were able to drop in. And I hope to see you all again next time.